right, so because how many of you are MAP folks who've been part of the master class? Raise your hands. And anyone who has not been in the master class series? Okay, cool, good. So because I knew that you guys would be here and you've heard my stuff before, I duly warned myself and had a shit moment about an hour ago saying, well, these blokes have seen the stuff. How do I talk about trending? We've already covered that and so forth and do something new. So I thought to kind of change it up. Sure, I'll cover trends and I'll cover some of the stealth strategy we've spoken about, but I'm going to have sort of a really kind of heart-to-heart talk with you about what I view as lessons learned in the context of life, culture, and legacy. And I think that you'll get a sense of where I'm going as I go through this. So brief agenda. What we've covered up to now in what we're calling this masterclass series that I've been honored to participate in is we've talked about the pitch, getting your salient message down, some fun stuff. I know you're going to San Fran. When you do, let's put your pitches to work and have some fun with that. We've talked about the kinds of investors, VCs versus angels, the fact that US money tends to be slightly, ever so more friendly, in my view, than some of the Australian money. We've talked about what I deem stealth market strategy, which merits review. We've talked about IP, how to protect your intellectual property, what are channels, how to use them, and pathways to liquidity. For those of you who haven't been in the master class, hey, that's why you got to join MAP. But you're welcome to talk about it and participate in more of these things. So today, I'm going to review real quick our methodology, and I'm going to speak to trending, but really in a new context. Cover some cultural challenges, which I see every day with we now have about 36 clients here from Australia that we've now taken to the US and into capital, and we see some significant cultural challenges. And then we're going to talk about launchpad value and finally legacy. So with that, a little bit about us, and I'm sorry if there's repetition here, but we operate under a filter. One thing about filters, you all should have one as well. My filters are attainable, measurable, and sustainable. I don't want you as a client, and I don't think you should take any vendor, myself included as an investor or an advisor, unless we can articulate together attainable deliverables. What can we do and how can we get them? You want to use your inner engineer and you want to put some measurability onto them. So if you were to work with an advisor and they said one deliverable is make introductions, introductions are now not a PowerPoint list of folks that you might otherwise find on Google. Introductions are with an aim of a commercial outcome. So if I introduce a food company to a broker, I make the deal with the broker to get you into a supermarket. If I introduce an ICT company into something that's a channel, we're looking for a measure of success, like here's the commercial terms, this is how they can introduce you and roll you out. And sustainable. I want sustainable relationships. I want to know you forever, even if you just make a lot of money and move on. I want to maintain a relationship with you because that's interesting to me. And some of the companies we represent here are on the screen, but there are others and more coming, including American ones. And you got to have an address from the young lady from EZBZ, Shauna. How was that? Did you guys enjoy that one? Good. She's as cool as it gets in terms of how switched on her tech is. I actually met her with Rowan at CES, and I did not expect, frankly, Shauna to be as switched on as she is. And one of the things about that, we're going to talk about metrics, is how her tech speaks for itself. And it's a new way of thinking about metrics, and we're going to go into that a little bit. So we've covered market entry strategies, which is on this screen before you, the platform offering, et cetera. And we've talked about a little bit of what I think are what we call our stealth strategies. One is elephant hunting that has worked for a lot of my Australian clients. So we've got an Australian client into, it looks like we'll get them into Disney. We've gotten a few into Northrop Grumman, Lockheed Martin, major global brands. And where you hunt for an elephant and succeed is you think about what is the values and culture of the elephant. In the context of eBay and PayPal, I'll tell you what it is. In that company, eBay, PayPal, it's connected commerce. So any one of you who has good technology, we have to think, how is it connected commerce? How does it connect the business intelligence, the presentation, the front-end UI, the graphic user interface, the experience to the commercial transaction? That's what they're thinking about. And then we talk about stealth adoption routes, which usually are channels, but they can also be incubators, much like MAP. We go through a strategy and a process, which is we want to identify a vertical, a sector that you think that your technology can be applied to. Braden, as we all know, has amazing technology, but now he's thinking, well, maybe it's applied, even though it's electric, to water. And so we were looking for use cases, and we want to find friendly use cases. In Braden's case, there's some friends out there. They might be big elephants like GE, but they might be the DOE, Department of Energy, that actually gives you free money. How good is that? So there are ways to find a friendly adopter within the context of a vertical. What that gives you is the next piece, sometimes, which is a use case. And so you want to find use cases among foundries and incubators, but also from companies or users in a specific vertical. Sometimes that vertical or sector stuff is driven by legislation or something that the sector or vertical has to comply with. We also think about geographic and subject matter perpetual licensees. One of my favorite investors, who's invested in a few of the Australian companies we represent, is from hospitality. He was a major figure he was the president of the world's largest airline. He was a major figure in Gate Gourmet, the caterer to the world's largest airlines. He was a major figure in Marriott. And he's at a point in life where he wants to invest, but he always wants to invest in what he calls synergistic investment, where he can add value. And in his case, it's hospitality. So he's investing with us in a company that empowers employees in hospitality. He's investing in really cool BI and dashboards that he thinks have a good use in the airline industry and in other aspects of hospitality, and transportation. So we think about someone who might be an investor, but also might be a licensee. And then we talked about the hybrid VAR model. I'll just remind you, a VAR is a value-added reseller. In short, they take 25% of what they sell for you. So if you're selling something for $10, they're earning $250. If they sell $1 million worth of your stuff, they get $250,000. Now, if you're in Australia and you meet that value-added reseller, the bloke who tells you that that's what they do, you're like, this is too good to be true. All right, mate, we'll make a deal. The problem is that VAR almost always tells our Australian companies the following, particularly if you're a startup. Mate, that is how I work. Love to help you. But I'm doing something for the following 3 companies that are 20 and 30 and $40 million players. And they give me these brochures and they're proven and they already have the use case. They're already set. And frankly, it's just easier for me as a channel partner. They give me what I need as a channel partner to sell their stuff. And you're like, oh, how am I going to do that? We actually have a Z to A model in which we say, are you saying, Mr. VAR, that if you do $1 million, you make $250,000? That sounds good. What if we were to give you upfront that $250,000, but show us the pathway? Show us that in 18 months, you're going to do $1 million, maybe even $3 million. Show us the committed resource at a desk in an office selling our stuff. Now, that sounds like a big number, but I want you to know you're all going to spend probably more than $250,000 to make a deal with VARs who can sell millions of dollars of your thing. So think about it. Not a bad deal to think Z to And then finally, the integration and teaming opportunities, which we'll talk about more, and we've talked about throughout what we'll call the semester. With our approach, we've talked about, we want to look at who you are, what is your competitive landscape, what's the plan, and we want to end our relationship with any client in 90 days with a plan of how we're going to go to market, and that's something we think we've done quite well. And I would expect you to look for that in any strategy, even if you're doing it self-made on your own. What's trending in the US marketplace? So look, we've talked about some of this stuff. A lot of it is, how can you marry your services into a sector? All the sectors are thinking about business intelligence, UI, UX, bless you, good stuff. They're also migrating to an enterprise mobility market. So in the business-to-business context, that involves security and all things associated with bringing your own device and device-centric. In commerce, folks are going to buy things with that cell phone. And that's an issue. You all know what socialization is, cloud migration, and so forth. The last two, though, are what we think are new, and we're seeing it across the board, and certainly new for Australia. And that's teaming and integration. Not enough of you are working with each other. There are folks across other incubators in this country that may look like you, and your Victorian sensibility with an NDA, non-disclosure agreement, may make you think that they're an enemy. They're not. In all likelihood, most of the people in a landscape that looks like yours are potential partners in integrating and teaming. And I think that's something we really need to think about. And then there's a new game. Everybody talks about disruption, and I want to spend a little bit of time on that today because we haven't talked about it enough in the class. And also scaling with less human intervention. So you met the woman from EZBZ. What I love about her company is it just works. It gets smarter every time. When she first launched, a few months ago, a radio ad, the cost per, these supermen VCs say, what's your cost of acquisition? You're like, what? Well, how much does it cost you to get a customer? And they yell at you, and you're supposed to know the answer. She just presses a button. She says, well, in Tampa, radio cost me exactly $12.25 to acquire a customer. And it turns out Pandora in Tampa, Florida, let me look it up. Oh, that was $4. We're getting it down to $3. And it turns out they come back and use our EZBZ every week. Here's the data. So it's just bloody smart. Good technology knows your cost of acquisition, acquiring a company, and a customer and converting them, and without human intervention. So what's trending? I don't want you to take trending too seriously, mobility, etc. And I think this video speaks to that. You get it. Don't be too serious about this trending stuff, but know how you can navigate a world that's digitally ready and sell your service. Now, one way to sell service we've talked about are metrics. And so one of the first key metrics is the team. And you got to have the team, the distinctive value proposition, what are metrics that you believe in, and your pathway to liquidity. On the team side, every one of you, we've talked about the slides, but you've got to have leadership. That might be how you've led in the market, why you decided to join MAP, why you decided to make your startup in the first place. It might be your history and experience. Maybe one of you had a startup that failed or succeeded, and failure is okay to talk about too. Here's a profile that you even find on LinkedIn. This guy is so switched on, or this woman is so switched on, she'd be the perfect CEO. Tell an investor that's why you need their money. Nothing wrong with that, but you gotta have a team. So even if you don't have the team, know who you want on the team, so have a candidate for the team. Distinctive value proposition, so bloody important. Understanding your market, your customer, and your competitive landscape. And if you can't do that, you're not ready to go forward. So you have to really know what makes you distinctive, who's out there, what do they look like. And on the competitive landscape story, that doesn't mean you have to look up the Gartner chart and be overwhelmed by it. Little story about a Gartner style chart is, take a look, don't get scared, take a look. It's ability to execute, completeness of vision, let's say leaders over there. Let's say you're the niche player. Just switch it. Upper right looks better. Tell the story, make the chart work for you. It's pretty easy to do. Tell a story on a chart in a landscape of why you are upper right. That's your assignment. Be aware of that. But also know that the superhero investors that you're going to talk to are going to pull out a chart. Don't be surprised. So see what the charts are saying about your landscape, okay? And I'll tell you a little lesson on the road. We had one company that was a little bit all over the shop with Gartner. And an investor told them in advance, this is my Australian client, when you come, there's this one guy who's a big player in our firm who's going to invest in you, but he's going to really want to know where you stand in the Gartner chart. My client showed me the chart and said, mate, I just don't get it. This thing is all over the place. I'm sorry, I don't get it. So I said, all right, let me look at it. Leave it to me. I went home and I didn't get it either. And then we went into the meeting. And it was like that moment was coming and, you know, beads of sweat and whatever. And the guy's like, well, what do you think of this Gartner chart? And I said, what do I think? I want to be very honest with you. It looks like someone shot a shotgun at it. Just pellets all over the place. I don't know what it means. Because this is the value proposition we have. Here's how we're a leader. The point is, you know your answer, even if the bloody thing is wacky. Then be able to say that, but say it with real firm belief. And the Gartner, so the guys went quiet in the room, and the one guy who's like the lover of Gartner said, you're right, I don't understand it either. And then we got into a whole conversation of how Gartner, how maybe we were so disruptive that Gartner should look at it differently, and he made a call to a friend at Gartner, and we've got an interview with that analyst. It doesn't get better than that. So you got to know what's out there on that chart. The next thing is metrics, right? And so, yeah, sure, revenue is nice, scale is nice. You have to know about adoption and conversion. We'll spend a minute on that. But I think I told you guys the story about the Israeli young lady who we had on a speaker in Silicon Valley about 2 months ago. I had given a class to you guys the night after. I was in the Valley and we had 4 superheroes on a speaker, and she was in Israel giving a presentation. And I had done the master class to you guys about the pitch deck, and I said, have your revenue model and all this stuff. And then this, the guy from, I don't remember which firm, a top 10 VC, says, what's your revenue model? And I'm like, okay, no worries, I prepped her, she's ready, we talked about it, no worries. And she said, I don't know. She said, you tell me. And I'm like, oh, fuck. It was a little frightening. What's this going to be? This is not good. Did they bleep on video? Yeah. I'm thinking, what are they going to do? And she said, I don't know, you tell me. When I launch with Mariah Carey next Monday, I'll have 1 million unique hits. What do you think the revenue model should be? And there was a moment of silence, and then one after another, these superheroes started telling her, well, I think you should do, it was great. She had them at hello. Because investors want to be smart, so ask them. So revenue's not the only game in town, but she knew about scale. She knew about adoption. And of course you have to have an exit strategy and a vision, and your potential acquirers maybe, your growth to IPO, and we've talked about that in the classes. We mentioned EZ/BZ, smart tech example. Every investor this young lady went to wanted to give her money. She's raised more than enough. She's now coming to Australia, Egypt, Canada, Russia. I mean, it's all over the place because she says what she does, she proves how she does it, and it's just smart technology. Now, if you compare her technology, with all due respect to her, to Braden, I don't know that she's that smart in terms of her technology. His stuff is cutting edge. On the other hand, it's really smart from an investment perspective. You can see how it scales. It doesn't need human beings. She's got the metrics down. She's got a plan. And it's bold and ready. That is what smart tech needs to be. Adoption metric, just so we're clear, how much are you going to get users? How many are going to adopt? How many folks are going to use your thing? Conversion metric is, what do I have to do? Even if you don't have the stats yet, What's your plan to convert a prospect to a client or a candidate to a user? And what are your techniques? And they could be some of those stuff that's trending. Appify. Here's the app that we've now incorporated. Gamify, reward, etc. Then there's the high growth metric, right? Here's how we're going to go to rapid adoption, disruption, and change the marketplace. And here's our value to an acquirer. We're just going to be really cool, and some acquirer is going to pay us an obnoxiously high sum because that's how cool we are, because of one of those metrics. And there are many opportunities to disrupt. Okay, we're in an Uber world. However, similar to trends, and yes, I probably will show you another video, don't be too serious about disruption. And what I mean by that is, disrupt, look it up in the dictionary. It's a bloody negative term. Confuse, disorder, interrupting, impeding, doesn't sound too progressive to me. I don't think that's what you mean when you're Uber and you want to disrupt a marketplace. So you've got to have your disruption message tell a story. If you're going to disrupt, you're going to reinvent. You're going to play nicely. You're going to fix, mend, rekindle. So for example, in your country, Australia Post probably could use a little disruption. Would everyone agree with that if technologists in the room? Telstra, God bless them, they might need a little disruption, all right? But if we were to come up with something so amazing as to have disrupted Australia Post, wouldn't we want to play nicely with the very guys at Australia Post? We'd want them to adopt us, wouldn't we? So who you're disrupting is not a negative, impeding protest thing. This isn't the 60s. You're not at Woodstock. You're not burning flags. You're giving ideas and progressing and affecting and evoking change. So I want to tell you a little story about Terracycle. Terracycle is a very cool thing. My friend Tom Zaki, he has an idea. He's going to reinvent recycling. Instead of recycling, he's going to do upcycling, right? And before he was in Australia, he's in 24 countries now. Before he did that, he had an idea that was crazy. We make non-recycling stuff, recyclable stuff, recyclable. And it's just so cool. So he does it through collecting, solving, promoting. I'm not going to go through his whole deck, but coming soon to Australia. It's actually already here. But major brands around the world use it. And you take a Target bag and you turn it into a knapsack. And kids at kindergarten collect Mars candy wrappers. They send them out and they become a playground. And Mars pays the kids, everybody wins. So he has this idea of how to change the world, and he does a pretty good job. But when he disrupts, he reinvents. So he tells the world how I'm going to do it in a happy way. And he comes up with upcycling. He disrupts recycling, comes up with upcycling. Here's the result. You get it. I brought Tom to Israel and to Australia. He's in, many more than 11 countries now. It's a lot of fun. But he's done disruption in a positive way. And I think that that's what you also should aspire to. And what Terracycle's also done is what every one of you can do. You're solving a problem. You're approaching it with a unique technology, which is ultimately a solution. You're bringing it to market. You're teaming, you're integrating, you're identifying channels. In his case, most of the brands in the world. Okay? And you're deploying it for a conversion acquisition method. In his case, folks love this thing. It's win-win. So it's a negative to positive, in my view, the way you think about disruption. We need to think about disruption. So a little bit stuff from my travels in Australia and some cultural things. Many of you have heard some of it. I'll just review the cultural challenges for young Australians, young startups from Australia, or established companies in Australia who enter America. One is this tall poppy syndrome and big noting. You got to lose that. We've talked about it, but in simple terms, if you're asking a bloke to give you $1 million and you can't big note, go home. You guys got it? no Victorian kindness. You got to believe in your stuff with great zeal and pride and ambition. That young lady, Shauna, who you met in Vegas, she's a pretty tough cookie. She knows what she wants. She's like a bulldozer. She goes at you. But you know what? Good on her. Every investor loves it. So you got to believe in yourself. Commercial outcomes. We come from a coffee culture here in Melbourne, and the coffee is indeed delicious. But you got to think like a tank, not like a bloke that drinks coffee, which means less coffees, more commercial outcomes. Or if you have a coffee, I told you about my friend who was traveling with me. He came to a master class, the first one I gave, from Israel. And I had this great session, and the new client that I met was a startup in Australia, a very well-known one. And I was like, oh, wasn't that great, mate? I said that to the Israeli guy. And he's one of my oldest friends, and he said, Salsberg, he calls me Salsberg because all my friends call me my last name. He says, Salsberg, I don't know what the hell that was. He goes, that meeting would never take place in Israel. There's no follow-up. You've just agreed to another coffee next month, and you're happy. That's bloody ridiculous, unacceptable. It doesn't work that way. You got it in New York or Tel Aviv. If you have a meeting, you got to have a commercial outcome. I've got to tell you, what's our plan, mate? What's our follow-up? How are we going to get to something viable? And it's a simple concept that is a little different for Australians. But the next point, and I had the pleasure, as did Rowan, to be a little bit at the Australian-American Leadership Dialogue. And I got to tell you, the next point is, when I tell you these comments around Australian culture, or handicaps, if you will, you also have to know what is truly Australian greatness. And it's embodied in Rowan and some of the beautiful folks I've had the pleasure to meet here. And so I'll just give you my 2 cents. And the reason I'm doing this is because that same Shauna, who doesn't have tall poppy syndrome, and she doesn't have a problem big noting, but she knows what's good about her, and that helps her get over it. So know what's good about you. So I'll just give you my perspective from a New Yorker. As Rowan knows, some of you know, my little boy has cancer. And my American friends don't ask about him a lot. Because Americans, if 2 blokes know each other for 30 years in America, they cry and make a Hollywood movie. In Melbourne, at most of the restaurants, you meet a lot of people who know each other 20 years. It's not Hollywood, it's just life. That's a really great thing about Australians. You guys are good friends. You got charm, you got values, you have integrity. That's great stuff. Bring that into your brand. Show how that relates to your mission. Show how that relates to your delivery when you're talking to Superman and asking him for a check. I did this because I believe in myself. How you feeling about that, mate? Now suddenly Superman in the Valley, who's a big VC, is brought down to size, and he's charmed by you. So yeah, I've got to know what makes Australia a great culture as well. Now we're talking about the Launchpad. What I see from my experience with startups and innovative tech companies and food companies and specialty product companies are that you got to challenge. You got to know what is your proof of your concept. Can you afford to prove it if you haven't yet? So what's your run rate? What's it going to cost you to get there? And you got to balance your needs and your priorities. Some of you have asked me, for example, do I do the patent thing? My patent lawyers here in Melbourne are very expensive. Do I protect my IP, or do I get a customer? Mostly, my instincts would be, get the customer, mate. Come on. But not always. So you're going to have a balancing act, and that's going to determine where are you in your life cycle. What have you proven? What have you QA'd? What have you learned? What are your value propositions? And what do you need to find out what works and what doesn't? Critically important. And I think it's a discussion that we have to have in the context of where am I in the life cycle? What's your commercial plan? So as I said, friendly adopters. I'm not just saying it. If you're going to write it down, guys, live it. What's your plan? I would hope that the end of this masterclass series or our relationship will end with me saying, who's your friendly adopter that you're going to go for? Be brave. Tell me who it is. And if it's some very hard to get company, we'll have a talk about it. Maybe it's not that hard. Otherwise, why am I talking about stealth strategy? Get your adopter, because if you get that, you're halfway there. And then use channels to accomplish it. Now, what's your vision? We talk about a Gantt chart. Every one of you should have, and it doesn't have to be in your pitch deck, but somewhere in your world, you should have an 18-month plan. So you all know what a Gantt chart is, but let's just put it in terms of from left to right at the top. I want to start at today, and I want to go across 18 months. And from north to south, I want to cover what's my technical stuff, challenges, so forth. What's my branding issues? Where are my use case goals? Who are my channels? How am I going to go to market? How much money do I think this stuff costs? And look at a plan. The exercise is beautiful, and it's an ongoing exercise. And guess what? CEOs of 30-year established companies do the same exercise. You never stop that exercise. Might as well start now. So I really think that's important. But never lose the dream. Sell the dream and event. And you met Shauna and you saw her dream. Sometimes your dream may be, I'm going to go into a new area and I'm going to advertise. You really don't have a lot of money, but you got to conquer a city. Well, let's look what this girl does. This is what we're doing this week. This week we're going to attack Tampa. We already know what the radio ads cost. We already know what the Pandora hits are. We're going to do something for $150. We got a kid with $150. We've invented Zoe, literally a superhero. She's the EZBZ superhero. And this kid is going to fly her around the city. You see that projection? A little projector in the car. Zoe, the superhero, we're going to conquer Tampa, guys. We're going to enter Tampa. We got a whole plan, T-shirts, a campaign, a scavenger hunt, tell our mission to the world, put this local booths out, and Zoe, our superhero, is going to fly around. Imagine her flying around Melbourne. Pretty cool. So she sold the dream. Now, I don't know if it's going to work. I'll let you know, though, because remember, we know the metrics. We will know the metrics. So if we go up and we make $1 million next week, you're going to know it. How cool is that? How cool is that? Talking about landing in a city, conquering a city. So, sell the dream. There's Zoe. Looks pretty cool. There's the app with the scavenger hunt. We're taking on Tampa, and we're there to win. And we got a party. But after the party, the vendors, we think, will use us. The customers will use us because we know our adoption and conversion. See, all this stuff we talk about, hopefully it actually works. And the last thing I want to talk about, and again, I told you this class would be very different, is legacy. And so that's important. At the end of the day, if you got a plan, or even before the plan, if you got a plan of attack and you're entering a market, what's your legacy? So I'm going to tell you a few things. One is, I think of legacy in the context of eulogy versus resume. Not that I want to die. But what's your resume? That's nice. But what are folks going to say at your eulogy? Think of the difference. Think of the difference, guys. It's a powerful question to ask yourself. Because you want to leave a legacy with your brand or your service. And on that, I'm going to tell you two stories. How many of you have heard the story of Easy Eddie and Frank O'Hare from me? Ah, cool. Now I get to tell you the story. So 1920s, there's a man named Easy Eddie. And he's a lawyer, and he thinks he's really smart, and he's worth something like $31 million. I know you're all going to Google him, and he is in Wikipedia. You'll check my facts after. $31 million in 1920s, that's like $1 billion today. He's got a yacht, he's got houses, he's got everything, but he has a Tony Soprano moment. He can't sleep because he's the lawyer for Al Capone. And he says, my son is going to think that my legacy, what's my legacy? That I'm defending some murderer. I think I'm a smart lawyer. I've got all this good stuff. I want someday when there's Wikipedia, I want it to say something good about me. Not that I defended this murderer. So Easy Eddie thinks about it, and he testifies against Al Capone. And if you all look at Google him, he's known as a really smart lawyer who was very brave. He stood up to Al Capone. He was murdered in 7 months. He died poor. His son grew up poor. But in Wikipedia, his legacy is preserved, in my view, as a brave person, as a profound person. Who cares about the money? Yachts are nice, but that's legacy. And I'm going to tell you a different story 20 years later. It's 1940s, and this story is studied in military schools and schools where rich kids go. A guy named Frank O'Hare, who grows up with not a lot of money. Frank O'Hare does not grow up with a lot of money. And he's like, does some crop dusting. So he's flying a plane around. He learns how to do that. And he's out in the South Pacific and the Japanese attack American sailors. And there's 80 sailors on a boat and he goes up. And there's 16 fighter planes attacking this boat. And he shoots down 15 of the 16 by himself. And then there's still one kamikazing to the boat. And he throws his plane in the way. Now he lives. They pull him up out of the South Pacific. But people are like, what the heck? Without being rich, they still study this day. How did this guy have that bravery? When you land in Chicago, that's O'Hare National Airport, named after this bloke. He's the first bloke to win the Presidential Medal of Honor. And they think, what is it that drives that legacy? Now, a little afterthought, as you go and Wikipedia the two people, Frank O'Hare and Easy Eddie. How many of you have Wikipedia'd while I'm talking? None of you? I was betting on you. Frank O'Hare was the son of Easy Eddie. How cool is that? That's legacy, redefined. Now, on that note, what does that have to do, legacy, with technology? Well, here's one. And here's my favorite story, and I'm going to end with this story. How many of you have heard of Slingshot? How many of you have heard of Dean Kamen? How many of you know what a Segway is? All right, Dean Kamen, inventor of the Segway and a lot of other cool stuff. Technology. He's like Braden on steroids, right? Guy's pretty cool. He's got good tech. Dean Kamen says, I'm like David versus Goliath. And Goliath for Dean Kamen is global, the thing that kills more people on planet Earth than anything else. Raise your hand if you want to guess. What kills more people on planet Earth than anything else? Sorry? No. Not a bad one, though. Not a bad one, though. Oh, but really, no. Oh, another one? Another guess? No, because Bill Gates and Clinton Initiative kind of teamed up with some other rich folks and thought about how to use problem-solving and technology to solve that. So you would have been right, but nope. What else? Heart disease. No. Dirty water. Dirty water is the bad guy on planet Earth. If you go by the stats, kills more people on planet Earth more than any other thing. And Dean Kamen, the guy with the Segway, all the cool stuff, right? Braden on steroids, let's just call him that. I like that joke, don't you? And he comes up with how to cure this. And he comes up with a little purifier, about as big as this 1980s thing. And it cures water. And if you look at a container, a shipping container, you buy them for like $800. Put a solar panel on the top, 2 flat screen TVs, maybe for $90 cost. So now you can get news. Drop that container, open up a kiosk, put a woman behind it. You just cured a village. A whole village can come with their water, and you can purify the water. And it's David versus Goliath. Dirty water on planet Earth, and maybe he could actually have all these people live instead of die. Okay, with pure water. But he's got a problem. He's got the technology. Good on him. He needs to team. He needs a delivery channel. Now, in the worst places on planet Earth and everywhere else, what is the one Western brand that you see everywhere? You guys got to get this one. What is the one brand that you see everywhere on Earth? Come on. Beautiful. Good on you. Coca-Cola. So he approaches Coca-Cola and he says, how can we team? Remember that from our classes? How can we integrate? How can we deploy logistics and a channel to solve this evil problem? And the result, he calls Slingshot, because Coca-Cola and him are going to team up, and they're going to take on dirty water on planet Earth. He sold the dream. He invented Now he's delivering. Let's watch that and see how that goes. Guys, what I would love is for every one of you to approach your channels, approach the dream you're selling, approach your investors, approach the problems you're solving with that kind of attitude. That's why you're here. That's why you're at MAP. That's why you're doing tech. And you don't only have to have a CSR, a social responsible thing that drives you. Not every one of you will be that fortunate. But you can still approach problems with that kind of legacy in mind. So thanks very much today.